Good morning.
Morning.
On this nice day, maybe too nice. People are spending their time outside. My name is Alan Palais, and this is the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. I am a member of the congregation and will be leading part of the service today. We are a congregation that welcomes all. Whether you're seeing us with spirits high or spirits low, we welcome you. Whether your beliefs tend toward atheism or theism, liberalism or conservatism, we welcome you. So whoever you are, wherever you are, whomever you love, we are glad you are with us today. Unitarian Universalism is built on 7 ethical principles. They're written on the back of your order of service. In addition to these principles, our UU culture promotes the notion that wisdom can be found from many sources, with a special place held by reason and science, but can also be found in the arts, humanities, and in the religions of the world. We believe we have much to learn from the great thinkers of the past, but in building the future, we are not permanently tied to any theology or ideology. With those values in mind, we consider a wide array of topics in our Sunday morning services, and we have a wide array of speakers, including guest ministers, members of our congregation, and lay speakers from outside our fellowship. Now it's time for announcements. Any announcements?
Hi, I'm Kay. I didn't know my husband was here. The newsletter is a little bit late. I have it done. I have to compress. There's so many pictures from the anniversary that, I have to compress them, and I had trouble sending it out last night. So it will come, and Albert, yours comes in the mail. And it's John's birthday today. I know he doesn't want me to tell him, but just say happy birthday. Don't sing to him. Happy birthday.
Any other announcements? Our speaker this morning, J.D. Stillwater, is a presenter and writer who is on a mission to promote science as a source of inspiration for what I would call spiritual ideas and cultural values. Using this approach, J.D. writes and speaks about a number of ideas that he believes will make ourselves more in tune with the natural world and our culture more sustainable, connective, and inclusive. This morning, J.D. will present some of those ideas and the science that inspired them. That is just a short description of J.D.'s work. For a more complete description and of his work and his mission, I highly recommend his website that has a lot of interesting insights in it. J.D.'s accomplishments and experiences are remarkably varied. Here is a short list. He is a UU, delivered many sermons and programs at UU churches, married with 2 grown children, a graduate of Cornell University, a 24-year veteran of K-12 science education, a writer of poetry, a musician playing percussion and performing at varying venues, a writer of poetry, a musician, has written a children's book, and much more. J.D. spoke at our fellowship about a year ago, delivering a sermon that was well received and had many interesting ideas. I invited him back because he has many more interesting ideas that I believe are worth hearing. J.D.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be here this morning, and we should probably explain, we had some technical difficulties. Apparently Verizon is down in this neighborhood right now. Can't hear me back there? So that's why we started a little bit late, and Rick was scurrying around doing his best to make it all work, and it wasn't something that was fixable. So we're here, thankfully, and our opening words for this service this morning they come from Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of our UU four founders, and he writes, "Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. When it breaks through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affections, it is love." Ralph Waldo Emerson. And as we do in Unitarian gatherings, we will light our chalice. And our chalice lighting words, I got myself all confused. Are actually in your hymnal, but you don't need to pull it out. It's number 537. They were written by Maria Mitchell, probably Reverend Maria Mitchell, but I'm not certain of that. Our whole system. She writes, "Small as is our whole system compared with the infinitude of creation. Brief as is our life compared to the cycles of time. We are so tethered to all by the beautiful dependencies of law, that not only the sparrow's fall is felt to the uttermost bound, but the vibrations set in motion by the words that we utter reach through all space, and the tremor is felt through all time." Literally, scientifically true. Our opening hymn this morning, Carly looks like she's ready, is We Would Be One. It's number 318 in the gray hymn. Now it's time for our story for all ages. So if you are young or young at heart, come down front and we will hear a story. Young at heart, or welcome to. I know you're up there. Once upon a time, there was a finger named Arden. And Arden was a twin. But Arden had 4 twin siblings. Can you imagine? 5 children, all the exact same age and the exact same family. Oh, right. Well, the Zoom people aren't with us today, so if you can hear me, maybe we don't need the microphone.
They're recording it.
Oh, right, that's true. So these 5 siblings mostly got along pretty well. But, you know, have you ever had, like, a little bit of conflict with your siblings?
Yes.
If you have siblings? Yeah, it happens, right?
Yes.
So, like, for example, sometimes one of Arden's brothers would say, "Hey, Arden, quit following me around all the time. Wherever I go, you're always right there next to me." And Arden would say, "I'm not following you around, you're following me around." Or sometimes one of Arden's sisters would say, "Quit copying me. Every time I do this, you do it too." And Arden would say, "I can't help it." Can you do that? Can you bring this finger down without this finger moving? It's really hard, isn't it? They kind of do copy each other. One day, Arden touched something really hot. And suddenly, all the fingers found themselves really far away. And it just kind of happened all by itself. And they were all a bit surprised and a little bit confused. And so they started talking to each other. What happened? What happened? Well, as they talked, they realized that this was not the first time that something like that had happened. Like, one of them remembered that there was that time when they were all cold at the same time. And another one remembered that there was a time when Pinky got pinched in a door and they were all in a cast for a few weeks. So when something happens to one of them, it seems to often happen to all of them. And so they started talking about it and they realized that maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe though they think of themselves as separate siblings, maybe they're all actually part of something bigger than them. Can you imagine what that might be? What are they part of that's bigger than them?
The palm of my hand.
Right. Is that what you were going to say too? Yeah. So they think of themselves as separate, but they're all really part of one thing. And so can you imagine like 2 hands talking to each other as though they were siblings? Why are you always following me around? I'm not following you, you're following me. So the hands are also part of something bigger, right?
Your arms and your shoulders.
And if you keep going,
The body.
your whole body, right? So fingers are parts of hands, hands are parts of arms, arms are parts of bodies. We can talk about our fingers as though they were separate from us, but they're also sort of us as well, right? And people often think of ourselves as separate from other people as well. But we might also notice that sometimes when something happens to one of us, it happens to all of us, like with a pandemic, for example. Right? It wasn't just one person who got sick, it affected all of us, everybody in the whole world. Sort of like when one finger gets hurt, they might all be in a cast for a while. So, if people are all part of something bigger, what do you suppose that might be?
I forgot.
It's a hard one. It's not as obvious as fingers on a hand.
The earth.
The earth, yeah. Is there another way to think about it?
Like the whole state.
The whole state? Certainly, people who live in Pennsylvania are part of Pennsylvania.
Some people live near the water, so they're in the right now.
People who live near the water might be part of the water, and they might be swimming now. Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, there are lots of ways to think about it. In fact, there are so many ways to think about it that adults sometimes spend a lot of time arguing about it. And they have a lot of different names for that something bigger that we are part of. But there are some things we can know, we can agree on, and Earth is one of them. We know that we are part of the Earth. We didn't come here, like I didn't come here from somewhere else. So that's one way to think about it, like as you go about your day and through the rest of this week. If you find yourself acting like a finger, you might take a moment to pause and remember, wait, I'm part of something bigger, like the earth. Any questions? All right. Have a happy Halloween. Did you already do trick-or-treating?
I did
You did?
I had a big Halloween party yesterday.
Wow.
So I did trick-or-treating.
Trick-or-treating.
And I'm going to do trick-or-treating tomorrow.
Okay. Costumes are fun. Well, thank you for coming up and listening to the story. And now I guess we sing you to
And I tell you
another part of the building.
Did I tell you what I'm going to be for Halloween?
Sure. Is it different from the costume you're wearing now?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to be a very, very princess with a pretty big skirt.
A princess with a big skirt. That sounds like fun.
The big skirt.
All right, thank you.
We all contribute a great deal to our fellowship in the work we do and in the money we pledge. Our basket collections provide a small but not insignificant part of our income. So each Sunday, we pass the basket to keep our fellowship going. Yes, you can end it.
I want to start this morning with a reading from the Reverend Mark Bellatini, who I later, after I chose this, I realized that he helped formulate the new, I'm having trouble with words this morning, this thing. He helped put this together. So well known in UUA circles. It's called In Heaven. And he writes, "Ah, it's true. When our ancestors spoke of heaven, they were speaking of this moment. When they went on about nirvana, they imagined a time like this. When they sang of paradise, it was this morning they imagined. A time when all the mysteries of life and death are blended in a community of praise. When the bones of ancient lovers are given flesh again in our own bodies. Teachers of long ago speaking of love and truth once more in lives so ordinary, they are extraordinary. Blessed is our breath, in and out, quiet. Blessed is our sitting, our fidgeting, our movement. Blessed is our heartbeat, echoing the pounding alleluias of distant stars. Blessed is the silence that is presence, not absence. Wow. Powerful stuff. That's my spouse back there. She's going to do the meditation in a little while. Her name is Anne. And I have noticed that she has gotten a warm welcome this morning. That's wonderful. Well, Anne and I are low-budget travelers. And a few years back, we wanted to take our kids to visit Carlsbad Caverns as part of a cross-country adventure. Well, the only accommodations near the park were out of our price range. And actually, I think they were full, too. And we had heard that it's legal to camp anywhere on land that's owned by the Bureau of Land Management, the Federal Bureau of Land Management. And our AAA map showed this huge area marked BLM right across the highway from Carlsbad Caverns. So that was perfect for us. That's what we decided to do. And the clicker is working, yay. So we drove out this really rugged sort of dirt track out into this kind of country, and we pitched our tent on the dusty hardpan. We made and ate supper with our kids, but before going to bed, I realized that I would need to use the restroom. Number 2. Well, you know, the closest restroom was over the horizon from where we were, and, you know, dusty dirt track to get there. We are veteran campers. We've done a fair amount of camping in our lives, enough to know that in the East, here in Pennsylvania, the proper way to dispose of one's solid bodily waste is to bury it at least 6 inches deep and not near a water source and all that sort of thing. But out in the desert, the appropriate way to deal with bodily waste is to leave it to dry on the surface in the sun. So I strolled some distance away from where we were camping and did what I needed to do. And on the way, I enjoyed the incredibly, have you ever seen a star field in the desert at night? There's something about that thin air that has really low humidity that the stars are amazing. Now at this point you may be thinking that this story involves a painful encounter with a cactus, but no, it's not that much fun. And while there were plenty of prickly plants around, this story's magic actually begins the following morning. As we packed up in the bright morning sun, we saw something that you can't see in Pennsylvania. At different times, now the clicker has decided to stop working. There it is. And this is actually a movie, but because of our technical difficulties this morning, it's just a still image. But beetles that look just like this came through our campsite, pushing these really nice round brown marbles in very straight trajectories through our campsite. But those trajectories were at slight angles to each other, as though they were all radiating out from a single point somewhere off in the distance. And some of you, I can tell by the laughter, have already guessed which point they were radiating out from. But we were mystified, so we followed their paths in reverse. Like, we had not seen this before. We're from the East. And we encountered dozens of similar beetles, all pushing these marbles straight out from this, well, by now you've figured out that the point that they were radiating out from is the same point where I had squatted the night before. How did they find it? Where did they come from? And where were they going? It was astounding and kind of unnerving, and it made a lasting impression on us and on our kids. And I now know that dung beetles need those precious brown marbles to feed and nurture their own children. And oftentimes, you know, this is the desert. There are not a lot of large mammals around. So most of them, if they get any shot at all, they get one shot at finding a brown marble, finding and making, and having babies. Now this happened long before I started really thinking in earnest about science and spirituality, but it was an intimate and visceral lesson in many ways that I am connected to the world around me, especially the living world. What I do makes a difference for dung beetles, at least. Now, I hate to disappoint, but this is also not a message about dung beetles. It is about the science of unity. And you might expect science to be kind of a party pooper when it comes to unity and oneness. The humbug kind of know-it-all who ridicules all that kumbaya stuff in favor of cold, hard reality. And somehow we skipped a slide? No, maybe. There it is. There's the kumbaya, and here's the cold, hard reality. Maybe. There it is. Well, just play along with me for a few minutes here, and let's see what science has to say about unity and reality. Shall we start at the beginning? The beginning of time. According to the best evidence science has to work with so far, the universe began as a singularity. That's an interesting name given this morning's topic of oneness. And there's a reason it's called a singularity. I'll give you a second to read this. The state of being singular. The singularity at the beginning of time contained the entire universe, but compacted infinitely dense, so it had no volume, no size at all. Everything was one thing, infinitely small and infinitely dense. The Reverend Carol Martignacho has a children's book and calls it the everything seed, the seed that grew into everything. Nobody knows what happened before the beginning of time. Even the question itself is kind of odd. What could happen before the beginning of time? But the evidence we have now says that at the beginning of time, that tiny speck rapidly expanded or inflated, creating space and time as it did. So that means everything in the universe, from this morning's service to interstellar dust in the most distant galaxies, all of it is traceable back to that one single thing, that singularity at the beginning of time. Everything that's an object, as well as all the things that are energies or events, or that are still mysterious, like dark matter, all of them have a common origin, a shared genesis in that so-called Big Bang singularity. We know that in the first moments that the universe existed, particles that would later form atoms of hydrogen and helium condensed out of nothing more substantial than very bright light. You get enough really bright light, hot enough in the small enough space, particles can condense out of it and become matter. And the gravity later gathered those atoms into the first generation of stars. Some of those first stars went supernova, thereby creating all the other elements we find in the universe today, but then exploding them out into interstellar space as precious hot dust. Dust that gravity would slowly gather into solar systems with planets like the Earth. Now I know that was a really fast tour through nearly 14 billion years of history, but we only have a limited time this morning. And there's so much to cover. My point here is that the seeds of you and me were present at the dawn of time. And we are descended from stars just like those we see in the night sky, whether it's here or in the desert. Stars are in our family. We're not only connected to events in the early universe, we are those events still occurring, still unfolding every day. We are still one thing. With all our diversity, with all the different galaxies, stars, planets, living beings, there's only one event here. Okay, got it. Common origins, common genesis. What about now? What can science say about oneness in our daily lives? Because you're not doing Big Bang singularities in your daily life, right? Well, play with me again. Think of someone who lived more than 100 years ago. It can be anyone that comes to mind. You got someone? Everybody got someone in mind? Okay. Now, just take a deep breath with me. You just breathed in over 13 sextillion air molecules. here's the thing. Over 700 million of those molecules that you just breathed in were also at some point inside the lungs of the person that you were thinking of. The same is true of every person that ever lived. Just think about that for a second. That breath, and the one you're about to take, included some air molecules from every animal that has ever lived, every plant that has ever lived. They're all here in the atmosphere of this room with us this morning. Some of the oxygen molecules you just breathed in, now are you, like your fingers are, part of your body, alive by being part of you inside your body. So now, knowing all that, take another breath, mindful of it. Does it feel any different? Air and water molecules are so small and so numerous, and they cycle around the earth so constantly that every cup of beverage you swallow contains at least 150 million water molecules that passed through Jesus' body during his lifetime. Talk about holy water. Not just waving his hand over, it actually was in him, alive in him. And, if you prefer a different teacher, this has way more molecules, water molecules that pass through Buddha's body simply because he lived longer. Pick your prophet. It's true of everyone that ever lived more than a few decades ago. So all water is holy water. Like oxygen, water comes alive when we drink it, and it becomes part of us. So we are part of these interconnected natural cycles that kids study in science class, like the water cycle or the carbon cycle, and less well-known ones like nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, and so on and on. And we study these cycles in school like they're over there somewhere. At least they're over there on the test that's coming up. But they're also right here. We are in them, and they are in us. Every year, 98% of the atoms in your body get exchanged for new ones. 98%. A human body is like a standing wave on a river. Maybe. What happened?
Head too far.
There it is. Oh, and I'm so sorry that this one isn't going to play. A standing wave on a river is where there's some sort of disturbance. It could even be a dip, but something that interrupts the flow of the water, and the water makes this sort of hump. And it's constantly flowing through, but the hump keeps its shape pretty well. So our bodies are kind of like that. Our bodies aren't things. Our bodies are flows. Or more accurately, they're complex patterns in the flow. So as we eat and drink and breathe, matter is always flowing through us, just like the water of a river, where we tend to keep the same shape, but we're actually matter flowing through us. Another way to say it is that we are complex patterns in that flow. I would not say I am the food I eat, but I am a pattern in how that flows through me. This one's going to play. Who would have thought? And that flow, the flow that's flowing through me, is completely interconnected with the rest of the earth as a whole, because the atmosphere and the hydrosphere and the lithosphere are completely interconnected systems. It's only our language that tries to separate them. So rocks dissolve in water, for example, in a riverbed, and then they become ocean, and then they get incorporated into seashells, and then into bird bones or rocks again. River becomes ocean, then cloud, then apple, then human, then air, all at once, up and down, across and around, interconnections and shortcuts everywhere. Here on earth, all boundaries and distinctions are either arbitrary or temporary. We are the earth. We are earth, just like the child said in the story For All Ages. It's not like we were each deposited here by aliens. Some days I think I must have been. But no, I was born here, and my body is made from the water, air, and minerals of earth. I am earth. We are earth. The funny thing is, it's not just inanimate matter that cycles through us. Other living things flow through us too and become us temporarily as they do. Mostly here I'm talking about bacteria. On and inside our bodies, bacterial cells outnumber the human cells about 9 to 1 because they're just so much smaller. There are thousands of bacterial species, trillions of cells, all cooperating and competing with each other and with our human cells all the time. They digest our food for us, they protect our inner and outer linings, and recently microbiologists have found that the species living on and in us influence when we're hungry and thirsty. They influence our food preferences, our weight, even our emotions. So is it me who loves cheesecake, or we? All of us in here. The human cells in our bodies each contain dozens of mitochondria. You may remember them as the powerhouse of the cell. And mitochondria turn sugars into energy so we can do things, move around, keep alive, keep warm. And we now know that these mitochondria are actually the descendants of ancient bacteria still operating cooperatively inside our much larger human cells. Now, mitochondria have their own DNA, separate from the human DNA that's in your chromosomes. Little circular DNA, just like bacteria. And you got all your mitochondria from your mother, because they don't come with the sperm. It didn't, oh, did we skip? Yeah. All yours came from your mom, matrilineally inherited. And she got them from her mother and so on. Now, paleogeneticists have been able, that's a striking thing all by itself, paleogenetics. It's a new field, didn't exist when I was a kid. But they've been able to use the well-established mutation rate of mitochondrial DNA to determine that every human being alive today is the descendant of one woman who lived in Eastern Africa about 200,000 years ago. And this is National Geographic's map showing how humans got from Eastern Africa to populate all the continents, now including Antarctica. So what that means is every human being alive today, regardless of race or gender or ethnicity, we all have the same great-great-great-grandmother as you. So look around this room. These people are your cousins. Literally, there's only one family of people on this planet. Similar genetic analyses and lots of other evidence from many angles of inquiry tells us that every living thing on the planet is a blood relative. Even the things that have nothing like blood, right? These are your cousins too. Stand up and show them your shirt. That's where I got these figures.
This is a staghorn beetle, though, not a dung beetle. So similar numbers that are up there. We're cousins.
We, each of us, is part of a single, unbroken family tree stretching back 600 million years. Environmental researcher Dr. Daniel Wildcat says, we live among relatives, not resources. There are so many more examples of our connection and unity from science. The bottom line here is that we cannot separate ourselves from the earth. We are the earth. The earth is giving the message this morning, and the earth is sitting in those earthen chairs listening. We and it are us. One thing. One life. One universe. So there's only one story, 14 billion years long, And the characters in the story are completely interconnected on every level of existence. What about the setting? What about space and time? Well, a century ago, a great mystic and spiritual teacher, this guy, showed us that space and time are actually the same thing. They're unitive. They appear different to us, but they're actually a single expression of reality, space-time. And now, a century later, one of the hot topics in particle physics today is non-locality. We think of space-time as having a framework. Even if it bends and curves, there's a sort of predictability to it, right? Things can be located. And two different locations are different, and there's space between them, and that space is real. The separation is real, we think. Quantum entanglement calls all of that into question. And evidence is piling up, a little bit at a time, that space-time may actually be non-local, meaning that maybe location has no meaning. I won't try to explain quantum entanglement this morning, except to say that two particles that are entangled seem to communicate with one another over long distances, instantaneously, faster than light, which supposedly violates the laws of physics as we currently understand them. Another way to think of it is that entangled particles become a single object that can somehow be in two places at the same time. And this, of course, is just silly.
Which works.
There was a paper published a few years ago in Physical Review Letters, a pretty prestigious journal, with the title, "How Space-Time is Built by Quantum Entanglement." Hold on a second. Entanglement giving rise to space-time rather than happening in space-time. That's very different. Science writer George Musser was quoted in Scientific American saying, quote, "Multiple branches of physics now suggest that at a deeper level there may be no such thing as place and no such thing as distance." End quote. So non-locality suggests that there's still only one place here, one location, even after billions of years of cosmic expansion. As though we are still in a singularity, but somehow diversified within it. What science says about unity and oneness is that your life story and my life story and those of dung beetles and germs and worms and rocks and flocks of geese and the moons and the Pleiades and distant galaxies' life stories are all the same story. Because there's only one story. And there's only one character in the story. We, us, the universe. And I say this not as a prophet or a mystic, but as a hardcore, show me the evidence, mainstream science educator. 750 years ago, the mystic and poet Rumi wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." So what do we do with this knowledge? If you think of natural reality as a kind of scripture, how would we interpret this deep interconnectedness? What does it mean for our lives? When I look around at the state of the world today, it seems to me that we are right at the cliff's edge of multiple existential crises, any one of which could lead to civilizational collapse. Here I'm talking about the climate emergency, the resurgence of authoritarian regimes, including in this country, extinctions, ecosystem collapse, pandemics and other invasive species, and the ever-present global inequity. All of these crises are byproducts, I think, of a culture, our culture, that's based on the presumption of separation, independence, and treating cousins as commodities. I think if we're going to save civilization, both individually and collectively, we're going to have to shift our cultural norms and values to respect the interdependent web of existence in which we are deeply, I'd say, inextricably embedded. Have you ever noticed that our seventh UU principle is the only one that isn't a religious or moral value? We can argue all day about inherent worth, justice, acceptance, truth and meaning, democracy, world community, all good stuff. I'm not knocking it. But the interdependent web of existence is a fact. There's nothing to argue about. It's like gravity. It's not the kind of law you can break. Right? Consequences are automatic. You cannot extricate yourself from the web of existence. Don't bother trying. And the more like we act like we can, the more damage we do, and the more we suffer. We and our children and grandchildren. So what do we do with this? Well, we can start with awareness. When we drink, we can think about how this cup of coffee or juice or whatever contains molecular emissaries from every ocean and every creature that ever lived. And we can be mindful of that connection. When we look up at the night sky, we can see ancient ancestors and life givers twinkling there and give thanks. When we see a dung beetle cleaning up a mess, we can say, "Hey, cousin, congratulations for finding it. And thanks for your work." As we walk in the woods, we can see relatives rather than resources. Stuck on the dung beetle, huh? We can greet new people like long-lost cousins we've never met yet. These kinds of awarenesses, this is the cultural shift from ego and separation to humility and appreciation that might just save us. Once aware, we can accept that everything we do affects everything else, no exceptions. We can sit with that for a while, letting both the power and the grief of it settle in our hearts and minds. We can affirm, I matter. As long as I'm alive, all the interconnected threads run through me too. I can't not matter. It's a massive responsibility. What do I do now? Well, I won't just complain about gas prices. I'll tug on that thread, see what's connected to it. The submergence of island nations, the wars in Yemen and Ukraine, livelihoods for oil workers, the extinction of polar bears, global supply chains, and on and on. I'm not just a consumer. I'm part of a cycle, part of a web. Is there anything I can do to lessen the harmful impacts of having to drive my car? The questioning is where the difference is made, even if you don't find an answer right away. Before I put that thing in my shopping cart, I'm going to tug on those threads. Where was this made? There it is. Where was this thing made? By whom? Where's it going to end up? Do I really need it? Do I really need it? I walked through Target the other day, and I was amazed to just notice that almost everything I could see in there was completely optional junk. Stupid stuff that nobody needs. I was in the toy section. When I fill out my ballot, am I voting in accord with short-term self-interest or the seventh generation yet to come? Those future great-great-grandchildren are part of the interconnected web too. It's a web of oneness that unites the entire cosmos into a single song. This moment, in this service, this morning, is that song still being written. And each of us has a part to sing. What else can I do but resolve to treat everyone and everything I encounter as an essential expression of my largest self? Because it is. May it be so. We have a meditation, and I'm going to ask Anne to do it because she's really good at it.
Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. Let's take a moment to just feel our bodies and maybe roll the shoulders back and forth, coming into our bodies. We breathe in, and out, and in again. Every breath, a bridge of deep connection across perceived separations. We are embedded, each essential to the existence of everything right now. With each breath in and out, connected in ways we have only begun to explore. Let us be mindful of our oneness, our wholeness, even amidst our astonishing diversity. Let our suffering, our joys, our griefs and conflicts, and all our perceived otherness serve an ultimate good. Even when we are as ignorant of that wholeness as a bone cell inside of me is ignorant of the songs that we sing together in this sanctuary. Let us be always aware of our inseparability with one another, with all our relations, our blue marble earth, ancient stars, and the pure white light of the dawn of time, now alive in us, here today, in this room, right now. And let us take a moment of connective silence. And if your eyes are shut, open them now and begin to move your body, awakening with a new awareness of the oneness within myself and within this world. And now we're going to turn to page to number 1064 in the blue hymnal, Blue Boat Home. Please rise in body or spirit.
Beautiful. We extinguish our chalice this morning with words from Jane Goodall. You cannot, she writes, you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make.
Thank you.
Thank you, JD, for a very interesting and inspiring service. Now we will turn off the recording.